I have had my fill of The Sims 4. The more time I spend in it, the more constricted I feel, which goes against almost everything the franchise has stood for up until now. After all, The Sims is meant to be a life simulator, and life is full of possibility. But not in The Sims 4. Most of the possibility that was once present in the series has been revoked. But to be fair, the game has been streamlined and buffed to a professional shine, which might make it more welcoming to newcomers. Stylistically, the game looks marvelous. Behaviorally, the Sims themselves feel more human, but still appropriately caricatures of humans. The game is more challenging and strategic with the new emotional meters of each Sim, but when Maxis went in and pulled out a majority of the stability bugs, they also pulled out most of the creative freedom the game has been a paragon for, and they took out the fun right along with it. And before people jump to the flaming sword conclusion that this is all part of some sort of EA money-making scheme to sell expansion packs, I don't buy into that theory. Why? Because The Sims has always been about selling expansion packs, ever since the original. Players have always been able to customize their Sims experience by picking and choosing which expansions are best for them a la carte. Because each Sims game had such longevity and diversity, players were happy to pay for expansions. Comparing core games, though, Sims 4 is the weakest in the bunch. But before I bang my head about what's gone wrong, here's what Sims 4 has done right. Sim behavior and mood are both greatly improved upon. These are the most dynamic Sims to date, but that's to be expected since The Sims 3 came out in 2009, and we've seen years of technological improvements since then. But the lifelong moods and traits play a heavier role than they have before. Sims now feel like they have a bit more personality, breathing some much-needed life into the robotic-feeling Sims of the past. The new moods themselves also add to the challenge of the game. Many of The Sims 4's skilled tiered unlocks are based on working with or around moods because certain activities can only be selected and accomplished while being affected by a particular mood. So if you're a player who didn't enjoy previous Sims games because you thought they were too easy, then Sims 4 might have a slightly higher challenge level for you that you'd appreciate. Multitasking and improved group conversations are much needed alterations to Sim behavior. Sims can now watch television and chat with one another at the same time in a group. They can do their homework while telling jokes, or they can sit on the toilet and have an angry poop while holding their orange juice. We truly live in the future. Combine the multitasking, better and more strategic moods, and improved pathfinding makes The Sims themselves the best the series has seen yet. Here's what's gone awry, and it's not as simple as missing pools and toddlers. Those are simply symptoms of a greater affliction. The Sims has never been a successful franchise because it only does one thing right. It's been successful because it does many things right. And with each iteration, the game granted more and more player freedom, making it less of a game per se, and making it almost a toolbox within a sandbox within an open world. This creative freedom of all types lets players' imaginations soar. It's this ideal of freedom that makes games like Minecraft and past Sims games so appealing to the masses. But the way The Sims 4 is set up, players' imaginations are confined to a much stricter set of rules, and that feels horrible. In the past, no two people played The Sims the same way, and that's what made the game glorious. Armchair architects or home and city designers are the most out of luck. The Sims 4 has left you behind. While it's remarkably easy to drag and drop walls and rearrange and relocate whole rooms, and the ability to resize and nudge items in the environment is a nice addition, that doesn't make up for what's seen the chopping block. It's no longer possible to create the multi-level, above-ground and below-ground supermansions. Homes are now limited to a paltry 3 floors, and basements are a thing of the past. But without comparing The Sims 4 to past entries, I still found myself absolutely frustrated by the incredibly limited number of options for each item in the game, from clothing, to wall covers, to floor types, when a rudimentary spectrum of colors isn't available for most objects. Some design options only have 2 color options, which is just laughable. But if you're able to see past the color and the style limitations, players who play their Sims experiences citywide are limited to 5 build lots, and purchasing and editing public lots is out of the question. Movement has been greatly restricted. Cars exist within The Sims, but they're simply decorations as they fly by on the road outside whatever map the player happens to have loaded. Players cannot own cars or use them as a form of transportation. The Sims 4 does not exist on an open map. Instead, each city is loaded by individual neighborhoods, which wouldn't be such a terrible thing. But inside each neighborhood, each home is loaded individually as well. That means if you want to run around inside your neighborhood, you're free to do so. But the moment you want to visit a neighbor's home, the game needs to go through a new load screen, and then you select which Sims you want to bring with you, and no matter where they are in the world, they'll automatically teleport there with you. The citywide map does not feel like one cohesive area. Instead, it feels artificially pieced together, which pulls the player right out of the experience. Outside the home, there's a regular flow of Sims walking by, which initially makes the world feel very vibrant and alive. But once you realize that almost all the Sims that aren't visiting that lot with you are walking in a randomly selected parade without any purpose whatsoever, the vibrancy and liveliness of it all goes right out the window. For people who play The Sims to push the game to the edge of what it can do with its zany jobs and interactions, you're better off than the designers and the architects out there, but not by much. You want to seduce a burglar before they abscond with your hard-earned belongings? Too bad. Burglars don't exist. Want to have an awkward relationship with a dead spouse? Not possible. There are no ghosts. While Sims 4 is still wacky in its own right, it's not as ostentatious or flamboyant as it could or should be. I could go on about tiny missing features from the game, but individually they're not important. But when lumped together, they take away a lot of what The Sims was and what it can be. I can only assume that all these sacrifices in gameplay, not content, are for the sake of stability. But with such a big game, I still ran into a small handful of glitches, none of which crashed or broke the game. I am deeply disappointed with The Sims 4. This shouldn't be a lateral move for the series, it should be a giant leap forward. Instead, it's mired in mediocrity, and it only begs the question why other developers aren't trying to compete for the life sim genre. There's clearly an audience for it. The game is more than functional and might entertain for a while. Newcomers might not know what they're missing. There are a few fun new things to discover in the game, like hidden lots, so in that regard, I can't in good conscience say that players shouldn't bother. But there is no way I could ever say it's worth the asking price either, knowing that instead of improving on the entire formula, Max has simply improved on a few core ideas, then demolished the rest. Perhaps it'll be worth the asking price in time if the game is bundled with a few expansions. The Sims themselves feel more alive, but the world they exist in is dead, and that's not something that can ever be made up for in an expansion pack. I'm afraid many of the problems with The Sims 4 are mortal sins that probably cannot be remedied and won't be forgiven by many long-time Sims fans. This video was made possible through generous fan donations on Patreon.